Welcome to, what was our title?
Uh, Music discussion time.
Music Discussion Time, the working title of our new podcast. My name is Emily KJ, and this is,
Daniel Euphrat.
and our first title was Band Magic, but it was too whimsical for Daniel.
Yes, I am not a huge fan of whimsy.
No.
In general.
So we're two human beings who talk about music a lot together. We talk very much in depth about, I guess, not really music theory, but just the bands, the people behind the music, what they're doing, what they're achieving, what they're failing at. And we decided that we're so comfortable doing this with each other that we're going to share it with the World Wide Web.
Because why not?
So Daniel actually makes music. He's in 3 bands, and I just think about making music, but I actually make visual art. But we're going to talk to you about music.
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
That is the plan.
So I think the wireframe that we have here to start off, since we had no established starting point, is to just talk about our own history and influences and likes and things, and we'll go more in depth into other bands and other subjects later. Do you want to start, Daniel?
What, with my history?
Yes.
Sure. Well, if like most people, I started off getting music from my parents because where else would you get it when you're a tiny child? But there were certain things that my parents listened to that I would gravitate towards, which ended up being like 80s Genesis, Phil Collins, Alan Parsons Project. So sort of 80s, I guess, prog light, or I don't know what you want to call it. But yeah, from there, then I kind of got into the more full-fledged prog, like 70s Genesis, which is like the respectable Genesis.
The respectable Genesis.
Yes, amongst some people. Well, yeah, because Phil Collins is just not respectable for what I don't know. He's probably unduly hated, but in any case, they were kind of got into prog, and then at a certain point, I think it's important to recognize that the underlying drive for me in listening to music is to shift my mood in one way or another. So, I mean, prog is a good example of escapism, where you have concept albums that tell a story, and they flow through different moods and different genres, and it's basically a very narrative form of music, which works like watching a TV show or like anything else narrative as far as escapism goes. And then as I got older, I sort of grew to appreciate other functions for music. I mean, still as far as it's altering my mood, but not necessarily in like a narrative sense. But that's something that you could have in the background to color your experiences.
No longer solid escapism.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's not necessarily as active a form of listening, where if you're listening to music and following a plot line of a concept album, you're very engaged in the music itself and ignoring the world around you.
Right, like reading a book or watching a TV
right.
show.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas with other forms of music, you have that on in the background, but you don't necessarily follow it with your conscious mind the entire time.
Right.
And for some, like techno or something, if you try to follow with your conscious mind the entire time, it seems very boring because it's repetitive. But the point being that it puts you into like a trance-like state.
Right.
So yeah, my taste started to develop and broaden in high school. I started listening to a lot of metal, still coming from sort of a prog angle. Like I started listening to math metal a lot because I liked time signatures. I thought things that were in 4/4 were not cool enough for me. So then listened to math metal, and then from there slowly kind of got into other types of metal that weren't necessarily focused on playing as many weird combinations of time signatures as you could, and were more about just creating a mood or general heaviness, as it's called heavy metal, because it conveys that feeling.
My favorite, if I may interject, which I'm
Yes.
going to, whether you allow me to or not, because that's my sort of deal.
Yeah.
And my favorite anecdote about you when I was learning about your music taste is one of the first times we hung out. You were, I didn't really know for sure that you were into metal because I'd only seen your electronic band play. And you hadn't told me much about your other bands or your tastes as much. Excuse me. And you started going off about metal bands, for having the big elaborate solos and like the guitar solos and everything.
Right. Yeah.
And you just kept bashing on metal over and over again. And then about half an hour later, you said, "Oh, do you want to see my metal band play this week?" And I'm like, "Oh, well,
Yeah.
Wait, what?" And then I was trying to figure out what your metal band would be like after you bashed on metal for like an hour and a half.
Well,
and then it turned out that, of course, the kind of metal that you're really into that I've noticed the most is like sludge metal. It's like slow and methodical and more trance-like,
right.
which makes complete sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the context that you were missing when I was railing against metal guitar solos is that the reason I was so angry about it is because I'm so into metal.
Right.
And so that it would always, like, if there's a great song and then they just throw in this ridiculous wanky guitar solo in the middle for no reason.
Wanky guitar solo.
Yeah. Well,
that's a good band song title right there. Wanky guitar solo.
Except what would the song just? I mean, Van Halen basically did that with Eruption. That song should have been called "Wanky Guitar Solo."
That's our new name for it from now on. Just go into iTunes, rename that song "Wanky Guitar Solo."
But yeah, so the argument that I always make about guitar solos is that they're way too often just the guitarist showing off a difficult thing that he can do, which is not important to the music. It's just like, look, I can play really fast, or I can play these weird scales. It's like, who cares? So that's the point is, and there can be good guitar soloing. There is in certain circumstances, but when it just turns into showing off, then that's when I'm very against it.
I can dig it if it adds to the music in any way.
Right, well, yeah.
I can also dig it ironically, as the kids like to say, misusing the word ironic egregiously. I can appreciate it on the, like, oh my goodness, this guy is so fucking full of himself. He just thinks that we want to hear him, like, masturbate his guitar for this, like, 2-minute stretch of the song. I can sort of laugh at it and enjoy it, like, mindlessly. I don't hate it as viscerally as you do, but then again, my background with metal is pretty recent. I'm not.
Yeah, so you're not
years goes far back,
right?
And mine is like I was watching from afar for like 10 years before I actually got into it.
Yeah, so you're not as emotionally invested in it,
but not by a long shot. No.
Right. Well, and I was also one of those like obnoxious metal purists for a long time too.
I can see it.
Yeah. So I've mellowed up on that recently, but I do have some of the vestiges of that still. But yeah, so then after high school, my taste basically since then it's been a progression of just I keep getting bored with things, and I keep desperately searching out new things that won't bore me. And so that's why now I listen to a broad variety of stuff, from like rap to electronic, but mostly I've listened to a lot of electronic music nowadays. And I've had forays into experimental noise and all sorts of free jazz. And like I said, anything that seemed like it might be interesting, anything that's like a drastic shift in the definition of music or sound, the possibilities, exploring the possibilities of sound. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so nowadays I listen to a lot of electronic, still a fair amount of like slow doomy metal things, trance-inducing things, I would say.
Vaporwave.
Yes, vaporwave.
Vaporwave's your new big thing.
Yeah, that's again, and it remains to be seen how much of that is just like, ooh, here's a thing that I've never heard of before. This is exciting, or how much staying power it has. But it is definitely very trance-inducing and mind-altering. So I don't know. I'm definitely a fan at this particular moment.
I can never remember that one artist that you played. For me, it was that Macintosh Plus.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
I really liked that. I
Yeah.
dug it so
Well,
much.
that is the breakout album of vaporwave
Yeah.
at the moment. I suppose we can have a whole podcast about that at some
Uh-huh.
point. So
Yeah.
we probably should.
Most definitely. I've heard like one album by Macintosh Plus, and I can rail about that album for a good like 20 minutes. But then again, I can rail about anything for an hour or so,
Right.
if given an audience, even if it's like the wall in my bedroom, I'll just go off. But
Yeah. So I mean, that's about it for my history, I guess. Do you want to talk about yours?
Well, I also had had the beginnings of whatever the hell my parents listened to.
Right.
In, I guess, early elementary school. It was the early 90s. I was a 90s baby. And so Britney Spears and NSYNC were big. There was the whole like boy band war.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I was not privy to popular culture in the least. I didn't even know that Power Rangers were a show. I just knew that they existed because all my friends kept bringing Power Rangers figures to school. I didn't even know how to tune into the show, but I just started telling people what my favorite Power Ranger was arbitrarily based on the colors. I was trying so desperately to be cool, and I tried so hard to get my parents to get me like a Britney Spears or an NSYNC album. It never really worked. I did trick my aunt into buying me an NSYNC album once.
Well,
but
had you actually heard any of that before?
No.
It was just because you heard kids
I just
talking
like everyone
about it.
was. I mean, I heard like what was it like? Bye Bye Baby or whatever. Like I can't. Like I don't even. It was Oops I Did It Again. It was like the one
okay,
big Britney Spears song that I knew because everyone fucking knew that song.
Yeah.
And I was like trying so hard to get into this. But my parents, my dad is a musician, and my mom, is a visual artist who like has actual music integrity. So they didn't want their kid listening to like pop culture trash. They were pretty purist about it.
Right.
I think there was a certain level of like there were certain values that were in that music that they didn't like. They didn't really like the sort of cheating message in Oops I Did It Again. They were very deliberate about what I was exposed to, and I think that's good and bad in certain ways. But they listened to a lot of Tom Waits, or they got me to listen to a lot of Tom Waits, Talking Heads, Laurie Anderson, Green Day. I mean, weirdly enough, I wasn't listening to NSYNC. I wasn't allowed to listen to NSYNC or Britney Spears, but I was allowed to listen to Green Day's Warning as much as I fucking wanted, as much as my heart desired as a little elementary schooler. What else? So there was a band. My parents lived in Richmond before I was born, and there was a band called the Ululating Mummies. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's like a local Richmond band. And they were friends with some of the band members, so they had this album called Sacred Snack. I don't even know how to describe their music. I would describe it as like multicultural, but it's like a little jazzy and silly and really cool and strange, just really strange. And so I grew up listening to that and a lot of Talking Heads. At one point, I got into traditional Irish music.
Okay.
I was really hardcore into that for a long time. Around the same time, weirdly enough, I was trying desperately to have a rebellious emo phase, but my parents wouldn't let me within 50 feet of a Hot Topic, so it failed. It was like me wearing brown cargo pants and a bright red t-shirt because that was the most I could get my hands on. Like trying to be emo, and it didn't work. But I would listen to Evanescence and stuff. And discovered Irish music. I listened to Garbage, Evanescence, System of a Down, and traditional Irish bands.
Yeah, okay.
I would make playlists with all those bands on them, and my dad figured out that I was putting these like ridiculously different band genres together on the same CD, and he didn't understand what was happening to his
Yeah.
daughter.
Well, a brief side note: we should discuss System of a Down more at some point. 'Cause
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that was an overlap in our, because I was into that in like in 8th grade.
Right.
And-
Well, I remember I brought it up because I still don't know what like the music community at large wants me to think of System of a Down. Like,
Yeah.
is System of a Down well regarded? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Do
know
I
either.
care? Not really.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I still to this day fucking love System of
No,
a
yeah,
Down.
me too. I think they've really held up.
Yeah.
At least
Like I want to make it clear, I'm not comparing System of a Down to Evanescence.
Right,
But
yes.
there is an overlap. When kids start listening to Evanescence, they're also probably listening to System of a Down at the same time.
Yeah,
And I think
there's overlap for sure.
I think they
Well, what I meant was, compared to all those other bands that we listened to in middle school, System of a Down has held up way better.
Oh yeah.
than most of them.
Most
So
definitely.
that's why I think it warrants discussion at some point.
I mean, the other band that I listened to around that time was 3 Days Grace, which like they had that song Pain, and like that's all you really need to know about them is that their big song is called Pain. And I Hate Everything About You is their other big breakout
Oh,
song.
okay.
So like it's it's just emo kid music.
Right.
It's not I would have to listen to it again to decide exactly what I think about it. It just I don't hate Evanescence. I grew out of Evanescence.
Right. Yeah,
but-
it's very much targeted towards a certain age demographic.
Right, but I never grew out of System of a Down ever,
Right.
and I probably never will, to be completely honest with you.
Right. That's how I feel as well. So
But yeah, so I went from that. I also, after a few years of listening to traditional Irish music, hardcore. There's a band there's a group that I still love. This Irish group called Dervish that I saw live 3 times, and they're really good. And then I discovered klezmer music, which is Jewish music.
Oh, right.
And I got hardcore into that. And that was like my other big thing. I liked anything that sounded vaguely medieval.
Okay.
Oh, I'm getting way too in depth about this. I know we both said that we were going to do an outline of this, but I'm like reliving the past. I should mention that as a wee child, I was really into opera in like
Oh.
preschool and
Really?
kindergarten. I insisted on going to a live performance of the Magic Flute.
Huh.
And like I cried like my heart was being broken at La Boheme, the end of La Boheme, when Mimi dies of tuberculosis.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm
but-
sure that you don't, but I was really into opera for a while, and then I was not into classical for the longest time, and then I was again in middle school listening to the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack on repeat for weeks, and my dad finally was like, if you're into this, you should listen to this instead. And he gave me Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring,
Okay, yeah.
which is pretty much the only classical music I'll listen to these days.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against classical music, of course, but Stravinsky is basically like fucking hardcore, man.
Yeah.
That's good shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, and yeah, that's basically math metal before math metal was a thing. I mean, it's,
Yes.
it's basically the same idea.
It really is. So what else? So, I mean, at one point,
Oh, no.
oh no, ringtone, ruining everything. So I got a little older in high school. I got really into Nirvana at the end of middle school.
Okay.
And that opened the door for like the Meat Puppets and the Pixies. We picked up a Pixies album at one point when I was in late middle school. I didn't listen to it, and I guess a couple years earlier, one of my mom's coworkers gave me. I told you this, Daniel, the other day. An album by Frank Black and the Catholics.
Right. Yeah.
Who I didn't know at the time had anything to do with the Pixies. But it was an album called Black Letter Days. And I listened to that so much. I loved it. And then one day, a few years later, I was finally listening to the Pixies pretty regularly, and there was one song that I realized the vocal quirks were a little too much like the vocal quirks in Frank Black and the Catholics. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I looked it up and I realized Frank Black is Black Francis from the Pixies. I don't know why I didn't put that together before, but I didn't.
Right.
And then I discovered the Violent Femmes after like way too long, and I realized at one point that they'd been on an episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which I'd watched in my early childhood. And my other favorite story is one of my friends gave me a mix CD with Stairway to Heaven on it. This is early high school, and for some reason I'd never really listened to Stairway to Heaven, weirdly enough.
Yeah. But did you not listen to a lot of like classic rock
Not
radio?
really, not like Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
I mean, like for me, classic rock was the Talking Heads.
Okay, right.
I didn't really. My parents never put on Led Zeppelin, or like I didn't listen to much of the Rolling Stones or Queen or anything like that. We didn't really listen that much in my house.
Yeah.
It was more like not really the big name bands, because my parents were both really tired out of the top 50 lists and all that.
Right. Well, but that's why I was asking if you didn't spend a lot of time listening to the mainstream radio, because that's
never. In elementary school again, I listened to this radio station. I don't know if anyone remembers this anymore. I know you don't, because you were in Arizona. This was like a Maryland station, but it was 99.1 WHFS, and they were like a rock station. And that's where I heard System of a Down for the first time. They played Nirvana, they played Green Day, they played some some rap and some popular songs and stuff. They played some classic rock, but I didn't always put names to songs, because something that I never got into was I never got in the habit of looking up all this information about songs and bands that I liked. I would just listen to a band. I didn't really know that you could look them up and know everything about them at the time.
Right.
So I never got into that.
Well, and maybe you couldn't. I mean, depending on what time it was the internet, like, was Wikipedia around back then?
When I was listening to HFS a lot, I could barely read.
Right, yeah.
So, it was pretty young that I got into rock. But anyway, so then, I heard Stairway to Heaven, and I was like, oh, this is so good. Dad, this song is so good. And my dad is just completely horrified that his daughter is listening to Stairway to Heaven. And he tells me, when I was in high school, I would hear that song on the radio 10 times on the way to school. And I went, Dad, the song is 7 minutes long. The ride from your old house to your old high school is a 5-minute ride. And he goes, exactly. That song is so bad it bends time and space. So I tell him I want to listen to more Led Zeppelin. He goes, you want to listen to Led Zeppelin? I'll give you some fucking Led Zeppelin. He goes online and he downloads every single Led Zeppelin song and album ever released, and he gives it to me, and I'm so overwhelmed by the sheer volume of Led Zeppelin that I don't listen to it for like something like 7 years. I didn't listen to it until I was in college. Right.
It reminds me of the old parents catch a kid smoking, and so they force him to smoke an entire
It was basically that.
Cigarettes.
I got caught listening to one Led Zeppelin song, so I was forced to listen to the entire compendium. I don't even know if I'm using that word right.
I don't know.
Compendium is one of those words I've seen in context in books, but never actually looked up the meaning of. And then finally, like, I got to college and I started listening to metal. I have this character that on my sort of work in progress trying to get back to, still on hiatus, webcomic. The main character, I decided, originally she was based on me, and then she kind of went on in her own direction. But it's like every time I was drawing her, it was like a conversation with her. And so at one point, those conversations got into like, well, hey, creator, I don't want to be listening to your shitty post-punk. I want to listen to metal. Because I started realizing this character would, based on her personality, she'd probably be more into metal, like folk metal, like the mythology-based metal, right?
Oh.
So,
But so that's why you started.
yeah. I didn't tell you this story. I thought I told you this story. No, so I had to listen to the right kind of music to get me in the mood for that character. So I started looking up folk metal, and so the introduction to that was the Sword. A couple of my friends gave me one of their albums.
Well, which is not folk metal.
No, but it like has themes and like the lyrics and everything.
Well, okay, yeah, it's like fantasy based, right?
So, and then I was told about bands like, I'm probably pronouncing this one wrong, Elevite, Encepharum, and I think that was those two were the jumping off points. Necrogoblicon, one of my friends told me about Necrogoblicon, and I went on Spotify and I started listening to those, and I had like Spotify radio on so that it was like Pandora, so it would just like songs would pop up in that genre, and that's how I found out about Gwydion Arcona, who we're hoping to see in October. Woo! I'm so excited. Heidevolk, Tyr. I really love Tyr. Just bands like that, and then I got into more metal from there, and then I started hanging out with you and everybody. Like last October, I started meeting the DC music scene, and people started taking me to like different metal band shows, and I got more into it. So I'm slowly becoming a metal snob as I sort of become more engrossed into it. I had a friend in college who was really into cattle decapitation, and now we're hoping to see a cattle decapitation show.
Right.
So
yes.
That's sort of my evolution. Daniel got me into Daughters recently, and I have not been able to stop.
We should probably have an episode about that
God,
at some point.
That one song, that particular song.
What do you remember what it's called?
I believe it's called Our Queens.
Okay, right.
God, I think I listened to that on repeat for like 3 days straight. I'm not even joking you. I just love that song. We were in the car, and Daniel popped in this Daughters album and said, you might like this, whatever.
Sounds like
I'm Daniel. I'm going to put on... No, that's the higher than the impression I normally do of you. I'm Daniel. I'm going to put on this Daughters album. You might like it. You might not. Life is pain. That's Daniel, everybody.
Yep, that's what I sound like.
So, and we were talking, we were just like bopping along on the road, and all of a sudden, track 5, Our Queens, comes on, and immediately I leap up in my seat and go, What the fuck is this? What are they doing? Oh my God! Holy shit! And I like force Daniel to replay the song like 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
It's just so good. So that's where I'm coming from. And my dad tried desperately to get me to listen to Zappa in my youth, and I never went for it. And then one day it randomly came on my iPod, and I, like in college, I'm like, oh my God, this is actually really fucking good.
Yeah, I need to listen to more of that, I guess. I never got into Zappa. I don't know. We can have a whole discussion about that too, because I feel like someone like Mr. Bungle does a better job of what I mean, they're not doing the same thing that Zappa's doing, but yeah, I don't know. I should listen to more of it.
I can't really listen to a whole Zappa album all the way through most of the time.
Okay, yeah.
But I really like it a lot. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm sure you have bands like that where you just can't really sit through a whole session of them, but you really like them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, I've gotten really into like free jazz and ambient music more in the last few years. I wasn't into either of those years ago. I've gotten really into math rock as I've discovered it. I didn't even know that was a thing until like a year ago. Yeah. and I've been listening to a lot of Elliott Smith. A friend of mine got me into Elliott Smith.
Okay.
And when I first heard one of his songs, I was like, soft guitar music. I'm not really into this. And then I heard more and more, and I just got really hooked.
Yeah,
So.
that's another person I need to listen to more of. It. There's a whole wave of like suicidally depressed acoustic guitar music that I need to know more about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I first hear any sort of soft guitar or piano music, I'm not impressed. You kind of have to give me a reason to like it.
Yeah,
because I just heard
right.
so much of that for such a long time, and it just sort of blends together.
Right.
Because there are a lot of people doing that sort of thing just to get attention.
Right.
Like, not really. I feel like their heart isn't in it. There's the whole like trope of the guy learning guitar just to pick up chicks at the party.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's easy to do. I mean, it's easy to pick up an acoustic guitar and start strumming chords and singing on top. So someone really needs to have a specific angle and a specific artistic goal to set themselves apart from the crowd.
But then I tried to learn an Elliott Smith song on guitar, and I went, holy shit, I would kill myself too if all my songs were written like this. This is like the hardest shit I've ever seen. Now, granted, yeah. I'm not a very experienced guitar player. I'm still a mega beginner. But
I looked at those tabs too. It was very complicated.
Yeah,
but that's the other part of it is that it can acoustic guitar music can be super complicated, but it can be deceptively easy sounding because it's just one instrument.
Right.
Yeah.
But Elliott Smith is doing something like on a whole new level. I don't even know. But yeah.
Well, so we've passed the 30-minute mark, which is kind of what we were aiming for.
Right. But we knew that was going to happen. We're loudmouths. This is what happens.
True. Yeah.
Me especially.
But as far as the first episode goes, is there anything else in particular that we should cover? I feel like we did a decent job of covering our histories.
Yeah, I think so. I think the thesis is obviously both of our tastes have expanded over time.
Right.
And we're both into a really broad variety of music.
Right. At this point in our lives, we're definitely... Yeah, I don't know about for you. Like I said, I'm always driven by boredom to perpetually find more and more new things. I feel like everyone is to some extent. So,
sort of. I'll get like an itch for a kind of music or like a mood, and I'll look for something that matches that. That's basically what I'll do. You were talking about how like there's only you. It was only really concept albums that really were escapism for you. It's really any kind of music for me because I get these vivid images in my head. Okay. But I mean, any kind of music can be escapism for me because I'll go into La La Land and start imagining all these elaborate scenarios and like music video concepts I never followed through with that I really should.
Okay.
I was sort of talking to you about that, where I have a lot of ideas for that sort of thing.
Right, but so you can be taken out of the present moment by anything. Yeah.
Any song can turn into a movie for me. I can just start imagining what would happen to this. I can put imagine fantasies I want for myself in my own life to music. I can use my own characters. I can make up new characters. Pretty much anything for these, and it gets pretty wild. So that's one of the main reasons I listen to music for. Yeah,
it's interesting. I definitely feel like I perceive music in a somewhat different way. At least now, I probably did something similar to that when I was younger, like back when I was listening to concept albums and stuff. But anymore, it's kind of I'm altering my mood, and I'm altering my consciousness, but I'm not creating a new narrative outside of my life experience and falling into that narrative. It's more like I'm escaping narratives in general, especially if I'm listening. Like I said, I like a lot of trance-inducing sort of stuff. The idea being that I'm not creating a new space to escape into. I'm just existing less, sort of. Like it's putting me in a non-conscious or a less conscious state.
I couldn't get into the trance for a really long time, but more recently I've been able to do that. But it's consistently, almost consistently, like to escape.
Right, but would you say, have you ever gotten, well, so like if you really get into music, say like doom metal or something, are you still creating images and storylines in your head, or is it just that you get swept up in the music and you don't really, your part of your brain switches off?
It depends on the individual song. It can be like it can be a doom metal band, and one song will send me into this elaborate scenario, and the next song is just so trance-like that I just sort of get way too into the music itself and fall into this trance.
Right.
It's really individual. I guess the other reason I listen to music is, I guess, to change my mood, but also to, I guess, like explore my mood in a way that I can't do by myself. I think I was describing to you at one point, one of the reasons I love the Violent Femmes is I feel like some of the time, I mean, I discovered them when I was in late teenager, super sad, emo, first world problems phase.
Right.
And I listen to them partly because I feel like their songs are saying, hey, we understand what you're going through. It's going to be okay. There's nothing to worry about. And then some of the time they're going, look at how pathetic you're being. You have nothing to complain about. Like, wake the fuck up. That's what I feel like the Violent Femmes are saying. And then interspersed occasionally with the odd God song about how great Jesus is, which always feels out of place, even though I learned why that is.
Well, so what you're doing then is you're using music to recontextualize your mood. So like you said, that you're coming into that because it's your entry point was that it was relatable because it was reflecting your mood, but then within that same music there was a transformation and a different viewpoint, so it can like shift you in the same way that the writer of the songs probably underwent a personal shift. Yeah, and I can't speak for Gordon Gano's state of mind in writing every single song, but that's kind of what I feel like. I think the song is called "Make More Money Tonight," and it's like this is one of the songs I haven't done a lot of research into, so don't take what I say as solid fact here. But it's sort of it's definitely a like a fantasy song where like it's saying, I was so beaten up and teased in high school, but now look at me now. The actual lyrics are, I'll make more money tonight than you'll ever dream of. And it's like total fantasy, but it's kind of silly, way over the top, but also you kind of are cheering for him, and it's kind of like written for the audience in a small way, I feel, just the way it's sung, just the way it's played. It's like you can really get into that if you felt at all downtrodden, and everybody does to some extent. You can kind of sink into that song and be like, yeah, I'm going to be fucking awesome. Right. Yeah. Well, all my dreams are going to come true. And it's like, it's kind of silly and poking fun at you for feeling so downtrodden when you're probably not as downtrodden as you think you are. And it's just a kind of a silly but uplifting song. I like it a lot. And it also ties into the idea that a lot of the reason that people listen to music, especially music with vocals, is because it allows you to sort of vicariously live through the singer. So that's why even if he's bragging about his own success, and
it's not written for the viewer at all, then you can still live vicariously through Gordon Gano's lyrics. Right,
exactly. And I assume that's the same reason that people listen to rap music where the guy just brags about how rich he is the whole time. Because it's like, why would you be interested in that? Well, probably because you get to imagine that you were that guy while you're listening to the song.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we've gone way over time limit.
Yes, we have.
Not that we really have a time limit, because we don't
Yeah.
We don't know what we're doing for this
Right.
first episode.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what we're doing in general, but yeah, I think
Who does know what they're doing?
really,
Daniel?
Yeah.
No one knows ever. No one will ever know.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good for a first test episode.
That will suffice.
Okay. Cool.
We will talk to you next week.
Probably, maybe. I don't know if it's going to be weekly, but we'll.
We should try.
Okay.
Let's try.
We'll make an effort.
Make an effort, Daniel.
All right. Ending the podcast now.
Goodbye.